Florida's historic cemeteries tell cryptic stories, and haunted burial grounds reveal ghostly tales. Old 1800s-era cemeteries and churches reflect the diverse spiritual beliefs, cultural heritages, and ethnic traditions of the state established in 1845. Historic cemetery tours provide insights into the experiences of pioneer families, the rich and poor, soldiers, sailors, Catholics, politicians, Cubans, Bahamians, African, and Native Americans. This video is proudly produced by the Rome Monument Company, a U.S. monument designer and builder since 1934. Families in Florida have trusted the Rome Monument Company for the highest quality private family mausoleums, personalized granite monuments and headstones, and bronze grave markers. Headquartered in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, Rome delivers and installs monuments and mausoleums in cemeteries throughout the United States. Two national historic landmarks in downtown Miami are the Freedom Tower and the Miami City Cemetery. The tower is a beacon of hope, freedom, and opportunity for the Cuban American community. Completed in 1925, it originally served as the headquarters for the Miami News. Located a mile north of the Miami-Dade College Freedom Tower is the only municipal cemetery in Miami-Dade County. The historic burial grounds were created in 1897, a year after Miami was incorporated. Famous citizens that shaped the early history of the Magic City are memorialized in the Old City Cemetery at 1800 Northeast 2nd Avenue. Among the 9,000 burials are pioneer families such as the Burdines, Peacocks, and Dr. James Jackson. The mother of Miami, Julia Deforest Tuttle, was buried in the cemetery in 1898. The businesswoman owned the property upon which Miami was built and provided the land to Henry Flagler, whose railroad helped establish the city. She's the only woman to found a major American city. A Civil War Veterans Memorial was erected by the United Daughters of the Confederacy. In 1915, the Beth David congregation started a Jewish section in the graveyard. Miami's most famous graves can be found inside the park. Mausoleum structures in the cemetery are accessed through a door for above-ground interments. There are 14 private mausoleums in the cemetery. Their conservation has been prioritized. The largest mausoleum was built for the Belcher family, and it remains in impeccable condition. Granite grave markers and marble monuments are nestled inside park-like vegetation. Though originally pine land, subtropical trees and plants were planted over the years, which turned the cemetery into a subtropical oasis. By the middle of the 20th century, it had become a lush garden in the heart of downtown. It's one of the few U.S. cemeteries where plot holders hold the deed. Approximately 1,000 open plots remain within the cemetery, but there are strict criteria for burial. The cemetery provides a welcoming refuge from the commercial activity in this area of Miami. In 1822, Lieutenant Commander Matthew C. Perry of the U.S. Navy sailed the schooner U.S.S. Shark to the island of Key West in Florida. On March 5, 1822, the city of Key West was established when Commander Perry planted the U.S. flag on the island, claiming the Florida Keys as U.S. property. Key West was a strategic location and soon became a naval base for anti-piracy and anti-slavery operations. The Navy was ordered to stop pirates from preying on wealthy merchant ships operating in the Florida Keys shipping lanes. In the early 1800s, pirates like Black Caesar and Jean Lafitte found safe haven on the islands in the Florida Keys. The pirates launched schooners and sloops from the shallow waters and hidden coves, and then attacked and plundered passing ships. In 1828, Key West became an official U.S. port of entry, and a custom house was quickly established. Its natural deep-water port was the deepest port between New Orleans and Norfolk, Virginia. The tropical island soon became home to Cuban cigar makers, New England shipbuilders, Bahamian salvagers, treasure hunters, rum runners, and southern merchants. The custom house with a steeply angled red tile roof in the Key West Historic Seaport District was also used as a post office and federal court. Key West quickly became an economic center and was settled rapidly, becoming Florida's most populated city at the time. The 4-story Custom House, opened in 1891, was added as the U.S. National Register of Historic Places in 1973. The historic red brick structure was restored in the 1990s and is easily recognizable from land and sea. The island's architectural crown jewel is now used as the Key West Museum of Art and History. In 1823, a U.S. naval base was established in Key West to stop piracy in this area. In 1831, St. Paul's Church was formed by an official act of the Key West City Council. In 1846, after a hurricane, the historic Key West Cemetery was established in the Old Town neighborhood. The 19-acre cemetery was developed on high ground, 16 feet above sea level. The cemetery is located at the foot of Solaris Hill, the highest point of land on the island. Built in 1851, the Ernest Hemingway House is now the most popular tourist attraction on the island. The Nobel Prize winner wrote some of his best-received literature during his time at the home. The famous writer and his wife, Pauline Pfeiffer, lived in the house from 1931 to 1939. Their restoration work in the 1930s helped turn the home into a National Historic Landmark that tourists enjoy to this day. Asa Tift, a wealthy salvager, originally constructed the residence and was buried in 1889 in the Key West Cemetery at the age of 76. In 1852, the Basilica of St. Mary's Star of the Sea became the first permanent Catholic church on Key West. In 1898, the U.S.S. Maine, a second-class battleship, sailed from Key West to Cuba to protect U.S. interests during the Cuban War of Independence. On February 15, 1898, the U.S.S. Maine exploded in Havana Harbor, killing 266 sailors, and the Spanish-American War started soon after. In 1890, the city of Key West dedicated a U.S. Navy burial plot in the Key West Cemetery to the victims. In 1900, a bronze statue of a sailor wearing a Spanish-American war uniform was dedicated. The Lone Oarsman Memorial is the centerpiece of the plot that contains about 24 graves of those who perished in the explosion. It was erected thanks to the efforts by Key West citizens and the Encampment Union Veterans Legion of Washington, D.C. The Los Martyrs de Cuba Memorial honors those who fought in the 1868 Cuban Revolution. Monuments in the historic Key West Cemetery reflect the long history and diversity of the Key West community. Old and new mausoleums can be seen throughout the cemetery. Sloppy Joe Russell was laid to rest in Key West Cemetery in 1941. At night, Russell poured drinks for Ernest Hemingway at his bar Sloppy Joe's. And during the day, he worked as Papa's fishing guide. The Jewish cemetery is a small section in the southeast portion of the property. The private mausoleum for the Mitchell family was built with brick crypts, gabled roofs, and arches, reminiscent of New Orleans cemetery architecture. Between 80,000 to 100,000 people are buried within the fenced-in cemetery. The historic Florida Keys Foundation helps to maintain the cemetery graves and grounds. The Historic Foundation works with the City of Key West to provide cemetery preservation and educational services. The Foundation staff offers walking tours of the cemetery streets to raise funds for cemetery preservation. A historic Key West cemetery tour was featured in 2005 in PBS's television's Cemetery Special. Culturally evocative bronze memorials mark the graves of Spanish Americans. In-ground and crypt-style above-ground graves are adorned with touching memorials to those who passed too soon. The cemetery is known for its unique and quirky gravestones, diverse history, and above-ground burials. This granite six-crypt modern family mausoleum was recently installed in the active cemetery that still conducts about 100 interments a year. The main entrance and Sexton's office are at the intersection of Angela and Margaret Streets. The phone number of the Sexton's office is 305-809-3986. The park-like setting is open daily from 7 a.m. Founded in 1565, St. Augustine was the Spanish Florida capital for 200 years. In 1672, construction began on the Castillo de San Marcos, the oldest masonry fort in the continental United States. Spain ceded the Florida Territory and St. Augustine to the United States in 1819. It is the oldest continuously inhabited European established settlement in the contiguous United States. St. Augustine historic colonial streets, churches, and cemeteries tell the story of its indigenous, Spanish, British, and American influences. The first Presbyterian congregation in Florida was organized by Reverend Dr. William McClure in 1824. The present Memorial Presbyterian Church was dedicated in 1890. The historic church is located at 32 Sevilla Street in the historic district of St. Augustine. The Renaissance Revival design style contains Spanish, Moorish, Italian, and Baroque elements. The building was a gift to the church by Henry Flagler as a memorial to his daughter, who died tragically in 1889. The famous St. Augustine benefactor is entombed with his wife and daughter in the family mausoleum inside the church. In 1832, the Memorial Presbyterian Church acquired the Huguenot Cemetery from Reverend Thomas Alexander. The half-acre public cemetery was created in 1821 due to the yellow fever epidemic. It is the oldest non-Catholic cemetery in Florida. The church took over the cemetery to provide the community with a formal Protestant burial ground. The church still owns and maintains the Huguenot Cemetery to this day. Tour the cemetery and you will see the headstone of Johann George Happold, who died in 1821. The cemetery contains a significant collection of 19th century funerary art and stone carvings. At least 436 multiracial and multi-ethnic Protestant burials took place before the cemetery closed for new interments in 1884. St. Augustine guided history, ghost, and gravestone tours visit the haunted Huguenot to enjoy paranormal pursuits. Huguenot Cemetery is a must-visit destination in St. Augustine, offering a blend of beauty, history, and tranquility. An obelisk-style memorial honors Thomas Buckingham Smith, a great Floridian who died in 1871. The cemetery is at the corner of A1A and Orange Street. It is next to the historic Old City Gates, built in 1808 as a line of defense for the city. The Cathedral Basilica of St. Augustine is home to the nation's first Catholic parish. The Christian congregation was established in 1565. The historic cathedral is located in the heart of St. Augustine's historic district. It was first built in 1797 and then rebuilt in 1887 after a fire. The cathedral's eclectic facade is a combination of Spanish mission and neoclassical styles. The church is a National Catholic Historic Site and a U.S. National Historic Landmark. The cathedral's 18th century Spanish Renaissance architecture includes a 6-story bell tower. You can visit the cathedral and take a tour. When you go inside, note the deep red ceiling and decorated crossbeams. Take a look at the glistening gold leaf lindenwood statues. See the stained glass windows that depict the life of St. Augustine of Hippo. This historic church hosts traditional Catholic Mass services and is regularly open to the public. You can take a 10-minute walk down Cordova Street to the church's original cemetery. The Talamato Cemetery began as Talamato, a village and burial place for Christian Indians in the 1700s. It is now owned and maintained by the Catholic Basilica of St. Augustine. In 1821, the cemetery became an American possession when Spain's Florida colonies were transferred to the U.S. Talamato Cemetery was used as the parish burial ground from 1793 until 1884. The first bishop of St. Augustine, Augustin Verreau, was buried here. He was interred in the mortuary chapel at the back of the cemetery. In 1884, St. Augustine closed all the city cemeteries for health reasons. Talamato Cemetery has a long history of ghosts, hauntings, and more than a few macabre events. In 2010, the Talamato Cemetery Preservation Association was established with help from the Catholic Basilica of St. Augustine. The TCPA coordinates public access to the cemetery and conducts preservation, research, and advocacy activities for the cemetery. The cemetery is open on the third Saturday of every month from 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. The historic 86-acre Greenwood Cemetery is located in downtown Orlando. It is worth touring Orlando's oldest cemetery, which dates back to the 1800s. It's operated by the City of Orlando, and its gates are open every day. There are very old memorials dedicated to veterans and soldiers of the Civil War. Edna Giles Fuller, the first woman elected to the Florida legislature, was buried here in 1952. Call the cemetery office at 407-246-2616 for information. In 1850, the historic Oak Lawn Cemetery became Tampa's first public graveyard. When Tampa became a city in 1853, the 3-acre cemetery served as the northern border. It was designated as a public burying ground for white and slave, rich and poor. Among the 1,700 graves are 13 former Tampa mayors. Oak Lawn, located at 606 East Harrison Street, is a half-mile from the old City Hall building. It contains 2 adjoining cemeteries, the city-owned Oak Lawn Cemetery and the Catholic-owned St. Louis Cemetery. They are cooperatively maintained by the City of Tampa, the Diocese of St. Petersburg, and the Tampa Historical Society. Headstones memorialize Tampa's early pioneer families. Henry Lorenz Mitchell, Florida's 16th governor, rests in peace here. In 1850, a Tampa Bay buccaneer was interred here. Martinez Ybor, who founded Ybor City in 1885, was one of Tampa's greatest benefactors. After he died in 1896, he was entombed in a 2-crypt private mausoleum. It features a stone cross on top with a rest in peace etching. The cemetery is listed in the National Register of Historic Places. A self-guided walking tour map is available online at tampa.gov. Explore the centuries-old monuments to individuals of historical significance. You can tour Tampa's famous cemetery daily from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. The City of Tampa no longer has spaces for sale in the cemetery. Jacksonville established the Old City Cemetery as the town's main burial ground in 1852. It's located at 911 North Washington Street, a few blocks away from the historical downtown district. It was originally known as Willie's Cemetery because the property was donated by Charles Willie, a steamboat captain. The earliest graves date back to 1827, with the most recent burial taking place in 1998. Today it is recognized as a National Historic Landmark by the Jacksonville Historic Landmarks Commission. The 50-acre memorial park is home to many Confederate soldiers' tombs. One soldier, Francis Philip Fleming, served as the 15th governor of Florida from 1889 to 1893. In the 1800s, obelisks were commonly used as funerary monuments. Cemetery sections were reserved for freedmen, Confederate soldiers, Masons, Catholics, and the Jewish. Joseph Finnegan led the Florida Brigade in the Army of Northern Virginia during the Civil War. The Brigadier General in the Confederate States Army was buried here in 1885. The nostalgic urban park welcomes visitors and tourists every day of the week. In 1970, the 108-acre Pensacola Historic District was designated as a U.S. Historic District. Historic Pensacola Village tours stop at the Old Christ Church, built in 1832. The Pensacola Museum of History is in the former City Hall building, built in 1907. Historic St. Michael's Cemetery covers 8 acres of the district. Over 3,000 graves are marked with old headstones, granite obelisks, stone monuments, and family mausoleums. There are at least 4,000 unmarked graves as well. Burials date back to the mid to late 1700s in one of Florida's oldest existing cemeteries. The colonial-era cemetery served the Spanish, British, and Americans. Old private mausoleums are still intact. Local ghost tour guides stop at the cemetery to discuss its haunted history. The cemetery is also a Florida state park. The outdoor museum memorializes Pensacola's rich past. It is a wonderful reflection of the people that came to West Florida and left their mark. It is being restored by the St. Michael's Cemetery Foundation, the primary steward of the site. The foundation partners with the University of West Florida to manage the cemetery. You can walk through between 9 a.m. and 5 p.m. any day of the week. The rich history of Coconut Grove, Miami's oldest neighborhood, started with Bahamian pioneers in the 1870s. Miami's oldest home was built in the Coconut Grove district in 1891 by Ralph Monroe, the founder of the Biscayne Bay Yacht Club. In the late 1880s, black Bahamians began working at the Peacock Inn and other area hotels. In the early 1900s, they helped build and staff Villa Vizcaya, the winter home of industrialist James Deering. It is now called the Vizcaya Museum and Gardens and is open to the public. The first black community on the South Florida mainland was started in Coconut Grove on Charles Avenue. The area was officially designated Little Bahamas of Coconut Grove. Bahamian families were buried here in the Coconut Grove Bahamian Cemetery. It was first used as a graveyard in the late 1850s. It is a popular tourist destination for people interested in Bahamian history and culture. When the cemetery was purchased in 1913, the name changed to Charlotte Jane Memorial Park Cemetery. Because the cemetery is near sea level and prone to flooding, burials were done above ground. The cemetery inspired the zombie dance scene in Michael Jackson's Thriller music video. Pre-production was done at the cemetery and replicated in Los Angeles. The historic Coconut Grove Cemetery is open daily. You can purchase a granite monument, bronze grave marker, or family mausoleum for a Florida cemetery by contacting the Rowe Monument Company by phone at 724-770-0100, by email at info@rowemonuments.com, or by ordering online at rowemonuments.com.